It all started with a girl trying to fall asleep in the middle of the night after a fun evening and not fully understanding what is really happening. She doesn't even see who is lying in bed with her. She thinks that she is in the same environment, but in reality, everything is a little different. She thinks she was just brought here after she had a little too much to drink. But there are only two people in this room and they are both under the blanket. It's her and the guy who isn't going to let her sleep, especially after she got him into such a state. For now, the girl is just lying in bed, not really hearing what he is telling her, but very soon she will understand everything. While he starts touching her, and not just like some stranger who puts her to bed, quite the opposite. His movements are bold and his hands touch everywhere they want, which makes her face turn red, and she realizes that something is wrong here. She very quickly begins to sober up, asks not to touch her, but for now she is sure that this is some friend who decided to stay with her. Only usually friends do not behave like this. And then the most interesting thing happens. The lady begins to open her eyes a little wider and realizes that it was not her friend. There is someone unknown in bed with her right now, and he also touched her where she didn't allow him. The girl froze in one place because she doesn't know how to react to this. She can't remember how she ended up here, especially with him, and what happened here before she came to her senses. It's clear that they didn't lie silently together, almost naked under the blanket, but now she's afraid to even think about it. She wonders in her mind who he is, although the fact that he is cute calms her down a little. When she realized that there was simply no distance between them, she even screamed a little, because at that moment she simply could not control herself. Her reaction is absolutely normal. In her place, any other girl whose life in this regard is at least a little modest would react the same way. And then she turns around to see what kind of room this is. It is very dark, lit by candles. It seems like everything here was created for someone to be alone here, but such thoughts do not please her. Next to her, a man with almost nothing, and she is wearing only a nightgown. This only says one thing, and this is slowly driving her crazy. She personally has no complaints about this guy. She is more surprised at herself, how she could have gotten to this point, and the most offensive thing is that it's as if someone erased her memory. The lady gently asked how it all started, and he began to tell that she climbed on top of him, and after that she asked him not to continue. At that moment, she wanted to fall through the ground or turn back time so as not to embarrass herself, and in the meantime, he liked how embarrassed she was, so he continued by having her undress him herself and doing it very persistently. She immediately apologized. She was terribly ashamed of her behavior. If someone in the past had told her that she looked like this, she would never have believed it. The guy says that everything is fine. He even liked it. And if she liked it too, then he thinks that she shouldn't react like that. She was already trying to move away, getting out of bed, but he caught her hand at the last moment saying, "I told you, everything is fine." And then he reminded her once again that he liked everything very much, and if she didn't mind, he would like to repeat it. She even liked hearing this from him, but her mind understands that this is too much and she cannot calmly talk about such topics with a stranger, much less agree to repeat something there. She pretended not to understand what he was talking about, then asked what exactly he wanted to continue, to understand for sure whether there was something between them or not. The guy began to act without words. First, he put his hand on her waist, and then he pressed her to himself so that she could not run away far. Unlike how she had behaved that night, the lady now became embarrassed, and they ended up falling to the floor together. You can't tell from her reaction that she's very much against it. Right now, she's more driven by common sense and fear of how all this might turn out. Her face is still red. She looks at me with those eyes that seem to say, "Go on, but I'll still resist." He looks at her and wonders how long she will last because he literally feels that she likes everything, but something prevents her from admitting it. After some time, he called her Lyanna, but this is not her name. And these words completely stunned her. Exactly 1 second later, 3 people burst into the room. They simultaneously ask what is going on. Then they realize that they had come in at a bit of a bad time, very bad time, and before that it would have been nice to knock. And the girl has only one thing on her mind right now. It looks like she got on a plane drunk. And this is some foreign country because there is not a single familiar person around, and they are not calling her by her name. In short, she is Lyanna Daphne, the daughter of a viscount, so that guy didn't confuse her with anyone else. And he is, in fact, Enoch Philip Diehart, and he seems to be the emperor of this country. If the girl understood everything correctly, then she got into the very same novel that she read more than a month ago. It also has an absurd title. Why did the young lady wander through the rose garden? The content was so unusual that she couldn't even finish reading it. But if she had known that it would all happen like this, she would have definitely read it to the last word and several times. Meanwhile, they are already sitting opposite each other, dressed, and he reminds that, as he said earlier, she suddenly burst in and climbed onto his bed and even undressed, saying that it had become hot. She replied with an anxious smile that everything was clear, and he responded that she really shouldn't worry. For her, it sounds very strange because at the very least she climbed on the emperor and this is enough to deserve punishment. The only saving grace is that he himself said that he was satisfied and even offered to repeat. And then he says that as far as he knows, she really likes to drink. And since it affects her memory, he would advise her to give it up, because not everyone is as kind as he is. She of course promised that she would try. After that, she looked in the mirror to get used to her new self. Lyanna Daphne, shining blonde hair and clear green eyes, the protagonist's cousin Elisha, her doppelganger. Lyanna, a typical villain who appears at the very beginning of the story only to die, loves money, craves power, and is also an inveterate drunkard. It's lucky that at least this girl knows about her heroine. Otherwise, all this would have to be found out somehow by chance from someone. The girl is almost sure that all she did was try to seduce the emperor, dreaming of becoming an empress, and that makes her feel very disgusted. And then he turned to her, and she said in a trembling voice that she would answer any of his questions. Philip says that in case she doesn't know, hair is not food, and even if a person is nervous, you shouldn't make fun of it like that. After all, hair is a girl's face, and you shouldn't ruin it like that. After that, he offered to bring her some food because he could imagine how she felt after yesterday. But for some reason, she said she wasn't hungry, although for sure, if she hadn't known he was the emperor, she wouldn't have been afraid to push him. And so, in her head, only one question is spinning. Is this really the same emperor from the novel? He does not look like a tyrant at all, and he is not even disgusted by physical contact. According to the novel's plot, Emperor Philip was so pedantic and clean that it bordered on misophobia, so he was the only character who never had physical contact with the main character, and everyone who touched him was mercilessly punished, which is why he was called the Mad Tyrant. He regularly fired servants for accidentally touching him, and also exiled people simply for standing within arm's reach. And whenever in history it came to explicit scenes, he pretended to be a stone and impregnable wall. It would be a shame if after he said everything was okay, it then seemed like she would still be punished for all those nighttime touches no matter what. Suddenly, Philip asks if she accidentally forgot about her wish, but Lyanna doesn't remember at all that she wished for anything. And now there were jokes that since everything is so serious, it is worth seeing a doctor. And this is already starting to irritate her. Right after that, the guy asked how she could not remember that she wanted to touch him. It sounds strange because if they spent the whole night, she not only wanted, but also probably did it more than once, just like him. Suddenly he admits that he is also interested in checking something, so he asks her to touch him again, to which she immediately answers that nothing like that will happen, because everyone knows that he cannot stand it and is disgusted by the touch of others. He says that it is, however, when she touched him, his body felt completely normal, unlike how it happens with others. And it also seems to him, even if it sounds strange on his part, but inside he has a feeling that she is the one who can heal him. Only from these words Lyanna did not understand anything, because she knows little about him. After this, he asks her to finally touch him more boldly. And he also thinks that she herself wants this and is wasting time, pretending that it is not easy for her. At this moment, she starts talking to herself. She turns to the previous owner of this business and asks what she did to charm him so much. The girl has been in this body for no more than a couple of hours, and even in that time, she couldn't get used to who she had become. Now we need to somehow maintain the image that everyone knows, so that no one finds out that Lyanna is no longer the same. One thing she knew for sure, whatever he had there, she needed to get out of there immediately. So she said that she was feeling unwell today and asked if they could do all this some other day. And for the sake of credibility, she also didn't say that she felt like she was breaking out in a cold sweat, to which he said that her facial muscles were twitching, and overall she looked pretty. So he agreed, and asked her, Eventually, they realized that it was actually her in his room and not the other way around, so she had to leave and wish him a good day. Philip finally asked if she was sure of her decision, to which the lady replied that she was not a child and knew her body well. On the way, she thought to herself that as soon as she got out of here, she would need to find a ship to secretly sail away on, or something like that. Who knows when this tyrant would suddenly change his mind and go wild, and this could happen at any moment. At least that's what she thought. And then she stopped, when all that was left was to simply open the door and go out into the corridor, after which he asked, "What's the matter?" She was in such a hurry to leave, and now she stopped, as if she changed her mind or felt better. At first the girl didn't know how to tell him correctly, but then she thought that there was nothing wrong with it. She took advantage of the fact that she supposedly lost her memory, and asked if he by any chance knew where she lived. And if they hadn't discussed it, it would have been impossible to ask him this question. He would have definitely suspected something. The next day came. She was already at home. She woke up and immediately called some assistant without even knowing her names, then asked her to bring something to drink. And since the assistant knows her mistress very well, she, as soon as she came here, immediately took with her what would definitely come in handy. Only she doesn't realize that Lyanna isn't real, and no one except the real mistress drinks alcohol in the morning instead of water. The girl very boldly took the first sip, then immediately spat it out, because she did not expect it to be so tasteless, bitter, and strong. After that, without thinking, she asks who drinks something like that right after waking up. And a second later, she remembers that she is a person for whom this is normal. The assistant was surprised by these words, but pretended as if nothing had happened, and Lyanna did the same. Then she says that at least she got home safe and sound. And that's the main thing. It seems to her that perhaps it is worth thanking the Emperor for his help, who without hesitation raised all his connections to find out where to take her. Then she had the thought that gratitude was one thing, but the ability to avoid people like him, again survival, and henceforth she would have to stay away from him. The girl thought that one of the assistants must have been nearby when she and the guy arrived here. She asked what they were talking about then, but at that moment someone unexpectedly knocked on the door. I wondered who could have arrived so early, especially since no one was expecting anyone and there weren't supposed to be any visitors in the next few days. When the assistant suggested going to check who had arrived, the lady thought about it. It seemed to her that she was missing something very important. Right before she got into the carriage yesterday, if the girl is not mistaken, then he promised to come this morning, and even whispered it in her ear, and also with a request that when they see each other again, she still touch him, and without a reminder, herself. It was very nice that her memory returned when it was needed. After all, yesterday there was nothing like that, and it was very difficult. After realizing what was going on, the lady jumped out of bed and asked not to open the door for now. She just understands who is behind her. And until she is ready, it is better not to open the door. And then the guy says through the door that he came to see her, and he is upset that she makes him wait for so long outside the door. Then he reminded her that they hadn't agreed yesterday to finish their conversation in the bedroom. And after these words, she felt terribly awkward in front of the servant, because she had already heard enough unnecessary things and could misunderstand everything. Although she should not care about this, but right now it is not so. Until this moment, the assistant could not even think that the lady could have some kind of communication with the Emperor, and she recognized him by his voice. And after that, she said that the lady had surpassed herself. After this, Lyanna felt even more awkward and started making excuses that she had simply misunderstood her, although in her place she would have thought the same thing. Suddenly, the Emperor says that since she is in the room, then he will go in himself. And Lyanna realized that if this door opens now, she will have to submit to the whims of this tyrant. In the end, she couldn't think of anything better than to escape straight through the window, and when her assistant warned her that it was dangerous, she didn't even hear it. Before she jumped, she thought that this was too much. She hadn't even had her first kiss, and now she was stuck in some crazy romance. And then she promised herself that she would never become the next victim of this despot. It's lucky that the window isn't too high up. Otherwise, it would have taken much longer to make up my mind. Meanwhile, in order for the assistant to understand at least something, I had to explain that, you see, the man behind the door is the Emperor, so she should understand her now. She only asked for one thing, that when he came in and asked about her, she would tell him that she was not here. Or better yet, that she got drunk and passed out somewhere far from home. The girl didn't even have time to answer. The lady had already jumped from the window because every second is worth a lot. While her leg was already in the air, the Emperor burst into the room. Now the main thing is that everything coincides in time. Otherwise, it will be very awkward about this whole situation, and you will have to explain why she jumped out of the room knowing that he came to her. The guy rushed to the balcony to figure out where she had disappeared to, but the girl had already managed to hide behind the flowers, where she was just out of sight. She hopes that if she just sits here for a while, he'll probably go away and everything will be okay, I guess. She was sitting here calmly, hiding, not bothering anyone, and suddenly she heard that she was no longer alone here. Lyanna got scared because it couldn't be that he came down here in a second, and even thought that she could do something like that. Meanwhile, the girl saw some kind of children's shoe and immediately relaxed. The lady whispered to the child to play somewhere else, because if the noise continued, everything would be in vain. The child turned around and then started screaming very loudly, but it was unclear whether it was from fear or joy that someone had joined her. The stress the girl experienced at that moment cannot be described in words. Everything could go wrong in a matter of seconds. Suddenly, she forgets why she was here. She started to think why the child was unattended. There should be a nanny, or at least someone adult with him. There was no one in sight on the horizon yet. She felt responsible because she couldn't leave here anymore. And also, some strange coincidence happened. At least for her, it looks that way. This child looks very much like her. Lyanna looked at her very carefully and began to think who she could be, because in the world of this novel, blonde hair and green eyes are not common. Maybe this is Lyanna's younger sister who was rarely mentioned in the novel. That could be it too. Suddenly the girl called her mom. Lyanna at that moment was simply perplexed. But just at that inopportune moment, the Emperor is already standing behind her. Lucky that now there will be an excuse that she was just walking here with the child and did not run away from him at all, as he might have thought. I had to pretend that she didn't expect to see him, the girl asked when he arrived, even though she knew the answer to this question perfectly well. After that, the guy asks what kind of child it is, whose is it, and she very quickly came up with what to say to him about it. Supposedly, she has no idea who she is or what her name is, and that she met her just a couple of minutes ago. So she couldn't pass by, leaving her here completely alone and unattended. Without thinking about how it sounded, she said that the baby surprisingly had exactly the same hair color as hers. And Philip is already all scared and asks only not to say that this child has some relation to her, and she is afraid to say it. He asked her directly if it was really her child, and she reacted loudly, only it looked more like indignation. The girl asks what he's saying because she's not even married, and actually it sounded very offensive, and she thought to herself that Lyanna might have been a minor character, but she clearly remembers that she was free. Of course, there is a possibility that the heroine could hide her child and tell everyone that it was her sister or any other relative. But we can only hope that this is not the case. And at that moment, something happened that left them both completely perplexed. The girl extended her hand to him and called him Dad. Lyanna, at least it seems, has nothing to do with this child, but for some reason she felt awkward, as if this really was her child. He looks at the two of them as if he had just been called names or humiliated in front of a large crowd. Here they have already entered the house, still silent. Although nothing like that happened, the girl simply confused him with her real father. Meanwhile, he tells her that it is not what she thinks, and she asks how sure he is that it is not so. After which he said that, of course, they only met yesterday and all this is physically impossible. And she asks why then the girl calls her mom and him dad. Philip says that he hopes for no idea what it all means and somehow it turns out that way. But the situation is interesting. Naturally, he couldn't keep silent and said that the girl looks very much like her, even if she is going to deny it. Lyanna says that she thinks so too and she is interested to know who her parents are. And then it occurred to him that, in fact, this child had been at her house all the time. And it was strange that she was behaving as if she knew nothing. But if only he knew that she did not know not only this, but also everything else. So the situation remained a mystery to her, just as it was to him. He's already starting to get nervous because they're not even a millimeter closer to solving the mystery. And if the girl could talk, it would be a lot easier. And then he asks, only not to say one thing, that she may have such a bad memory that she does not recognize her own child. But this is too much. And he also began to calm her down in his own style. Supposedly, everything wasn't so bad. He had friends who had successfully recovered and didn't drink so often, so she could still be saved. She started to get very loudly indignant that he was misunderstanding everything and that she was not what he thought she was. And at that moment, some man burst in. He was very out of breath. It took him a while to catch his breath. After which he explained that he had been looking all over the area for the child and how glad he was that he was okay. The man was surprised that His Majesty was also here, and the guy began to think who it could be. It seems to him that it is more likely than not some relative of hers, because a relative would not address her as a lady. He had to apologize for coming unannounced. Then he says that the more important thing is that it seems the man knows more about this child than Lyanna, so he would like to hear something from him. He only said that he was now responsible for taking care of her, but the Emperor was interested in a more specific answer. He asked directly whether the girl was a child of the Lyanna, yes or no, Lyanna. But the man quickly replied that this was not so in no case, and reminded that the girl was not married and this could sound offensive to her. In that case, now it's not so interesting, but still interesting. Who are her parents and where are they? The man asks. Has the lady really forgotten that she herself recently brought this beautiful child here? The girl doesn't remember absolutely anything. It probably happened before she got into this body. Naturally, she can't remember something like that. She asked if she had said anything about this child before, to which the assistant replied that this had not happened. The girl had never mentioned it. But still, she's been sleeping the whole time since she arrived, and they were terribly worried, but he's glad she's okay. Then he remembered that the lady was probably hungry, and he still hadn't offered her anything, and even blushed. The assistant apologized and asked if he could go away for a long time to bring food for both the lady and the child. And of course, no one would mind. As soon as the door closed, a terrible awkwardness appeared, because in some ways the memory loss helps her, but in others it doesn't. The girl thought that if the girl was brought here with a toy, then she definitely had a parent or guardian. Then she looked at the toy, and there was a small piece of fabric sewn on it with a name written on it. Ariel. This could mean that this is the girl's name, although it could be a made-up name for a toy. She no longer knows what to talk about with the Emperor without further damaging his opinion of herself. The only thing she thought of mentioning was that as far as he could see, she was not her mother and her head was in perfect order, although he had some questions about this. This time the guy remained silent. She began to explain that if he could think that she had so many problems, then it was not so. After which he looked at her with a distrustful look and she felt offended, and then suddenly he starts apologizing for going too far. Although it's very unlike him. Even too much. After this, Philip explained that he was simply experiencing something like this for the first time and did not know how to react to it correctly. She still didn't understand what the phrase meant. Something like that, but she kept silent so as not to create another awkward conversation. Meanwhile, he says that she understands him correctly. When he touches her, unlike everyone else, his body surprisingly experiences very pleasant sensations and he wants to repeat it again and again. Not only was she surprised to hear such words, but little Ariel literally copied her emotions and reacted in exactly the same way. Out of the blue, the girl started crying. She started hiding and buried her face in the Lyanna, as if she didn't want to see something or someone. No one understands why she was so scared, because they are alone here and no one even raised their voice. The girl says that she doesn't know what to do in such situations. After all, she has never dealt with children and even asked him to come up with something himself. He doesn't even know how to calm them down. He only knows that they need to be rocked in his arms, but that's not certain. And also from her touch, he felt such indescribable sensations that he couldn't even keep silent. He says that maybe now is not the best time to say this, but when she touched him, his body started to heat up. Naturally, she answered him that now was not the time for such conversations. Now it was much more important to calm the child down. And then she notices that he is already looking at her in a completely different way. Smiling, as if he got his way. It's both unpleasant and strange to watch. And she also has the feeling that she has to devote time to everyone, and no one understands that she can't split her time between the two of her. But who would have thought that today there would be such a situation? That there would be an unknown child in this, who would also take away all their free time? The guy turned his gaze to the girl, and at that moment a miracle happened. She stopped screaming, calmed down, and also smiled back at him. Now they know how to cope in such cases, although there is no guarantee that it will work as well next time. When Lyanna realized that his face had a good effect on the girl, she asked him to do something else. And since she was asking so much, he couldn't refuse. Somewhere he saw that people first hide their eyes with their hands and then open them. And after that, children usually laugh because it seems funny to them. So Philip did. After which the girl began to laugh even harder, and now she is unlikely to cry, at least in the near future. He says he tried very hard and is glad he can be useful, although he thought it would be much more difficult. Lyanna says that he is doing very well, and that he would probably be a very good father. But only after some time did she realize that this was probably unnecessary, because usually guys at that age are afraid of just the mention of it. She also thought that children probably like beautiful people, so it was easy for him to deal with her. And then she said it out loud, and he asked if she really thought he was beautiful. The girl replied that if we speak objectively, then of course, he is a nice guy and you can't argue with that. And then something happened that they hadn't even thought about all this time. Ariel touched his neck. The girl immediately panicked. She was afraid for the child, because you never know how he would react to this. The guy got up from the couch, took one step back, and at that moment, Lyanna thought that everything couldn't have been so good. And now, the moment had come that could ruin everything. She doesn't even know what to tell him, what to ask, because now everything will be clear from his reaction anyway. Just in case, the girl began to defend the child. She explained that she did not mean any harm. The girl could not know that he did not like it, and asked him not to be angry with her for this. It's hard to tell from his face what he's feeling right now, but the girl is setting herself up for the worst and most dangerous outcome. She doesn't understand what's happening to him, why he's behaving this way, because he could at least out of politeness pretend that nothing happened. Up to a certain point, everything was fine, but now Lyanna felt the cold emanating from him, and not on an energetic level, but physically. His body literally starts to freeze. She even saw blueness on his neck and had no idea what it was. She begs him to come to his senses. She didn't notice how she took his hand, and already forgot that the child was left unattended at this time, and could have already run away anywhere. The girl remembers that his body when she touches him. So she did it, and asked if there was any effect. In a matter of seconds, all the blueness was gone. He stopped shaking, and after that he pressed her even harder to himself, and said that a little more, and he would be completely better, and then asked her not to move away, otherwise the effect would be cancelled out. The girl is not sure that this is exactly how it works, But she still listened to him because she will not allow herself to consciously make a person worse, especially since no other method other than touching is known that could help him. After some time, she asked what was going on here. She had never seen him like this and wanted to know how to understand it. This time, he didn't make anything up, he just said it like it is. That it's because of the curse that he still hasn't gotten rid of because he doesn't know how it is. If he touches anyone other than her, his body instantly freezes, no matter how much time he tries to find out how to fix and cure it. Nothing works. There is no information anywhere, and no one has ever heard anything about it. That's why he became so attached to her when he found out that with her, everything works exactly the opposite. From her touches, he not only feels good, but it becomes very pleasant. That's why he wants to keep in touch with her, so that suddenly she could help him. Especially since he has become partial to her lately, but is afraid to admit it even to himself. Meanwhile, Philip says that it has been quite a while since his body stopped feeling someone else's warmth. And he understands perfectly well that his actions probably embarrass her, and he asks for forgiveness for this, but it seems she is the only one who can free him from this curse. At least it seems so to him. And he would like her to agree to check it out. The girl asks why he thinks so, because maybe there is someone else in this world who can help him. He wanted to answer something to this, but they were distracted by the child. He screamed slightly, probably to remind them of himself. They immediately turned in his direction and remembered that, in general, this is not allowed and that a child always needs supervision. Suddenly, the girl starts to take her toy and shows that she wants to give it to one of them. At least that's how they understood it. The guy asks if she is really giving him her toy, to which the girl responded with an incomprehensible sound. But since she didn't get angry, it means he understood her correctly. He leaned towards the toy with a smile, thanked Ariel and smiled at her so that she would smile at him too. He really liked the toy. It turned out to be very soft and pleasant to the touch, although perhaps it was just too long since he had handled it. The girl at this moment cannot believe her eyes. If someone had told her earlier that this emperor could behave like this with children, be kind and care for you, she would not have believed it. A couple of minutes passed, and only now they realized that most likely the child simply decided to apologize, believing that she had hurt the emperor with her touches. Lyanna immediately explained to her that this was not so, after which the girl immediately calmed down and noticeably relaxed. Philip even asked her to look at him, that he was okay, after which she smiled even more. After this, everyone felt very good, because it was good that everything ended so well. Otherwise, they would have all simply gone crazy from the fact that they could not cope with the child, and they would have been left with a trauma for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, the butler returned. He apologized for the delay. He just tried to do everything in the best possible way, and he succeeded. Then for some reason he thought that he had come at the wrong time again. He quickly left, and the lady didn't even have time to tell him anything. Immediately after this, the girl asked the emperor if she could ask him a question, but if he agreed, she asked him to answer honestly. At first he didn't want to say anything, but then he thought about it and agreed anyway, so as not to spoil a good installation. She says that she wants to know as much as possible about his curse. If of course he is not too uncomfortable sharing it, because she is, so to speak, a stranger to him, and he does not owe her anything like that. He didn't even think about whether to do it or not. He just started with the fact that there was a shard of ice locked in his heart. As soon as he touches another person, he gets out of control and begins to slowly freeze their body. After these words, she had a completely natural and expected question. How did that piece of ice get there? But what she didn't expect to hear from him was that he put it there himself. It sounds very strange. She couldn't wrap her head around the fact that he could hurt himself like that, and asked him to tell her why he did it, and whether he was forced to do it. When his body starts to freeze, nothing can melt it, so he has no choice but to wait for this frenzy to subside on its own. Probably because her family has the power of fire. By touching it, not only does it stop the pain, but his body quickly heats up. At this rate, it is possible that he will even be able to melt this piece of ice completely, and it will never disturb him again, even if dozens of people touch it at the same time. And then she had the thought that maybe he had mixed something up, that there are special powers in this world. Fire, ice, wind, and other forces that control different elements. Among them, only the family of Philip was subject to the power of ice, and only the descendants of the house of Lyanna, who inherited their blood, could use fire. However, if her memory serves her right, her heroine did not know how to use this power at all. Meanwhile, the girl tells him that she probably doesn't have the ability to control her power, so she doubts that she can be completely relied on. According to the plot of the novel, the main character showed the most powerful fire ability in the history of the Empire. Because of this, Lyanna was portrayed as a villain consumed by an inferiority complex, to which he says that it can't be. In order to suppress his power, her abilities must be far beyond the ordinary, and she is still sure that he overestimates her. After these words, the guy for some reason started to take off his glove, and she reacted to it as if it meant something. She asks why he is doing this, and before the girl can even finish this sentence, he is already touching the child. The lady thought that he was a little out of his mind and wanted to freeze again to test her strength again. But who knows if she will be able to do it twice in a row. Personally, she doubts it very much. Lyanna, just in case, immediately took his hand so that his hand would not turn blue even for a millimeter. The girl was a little late, but still he felt almost nothing, which means that next time, at least if necessary, she will be able to help him twice. She demands an explanation from him as to why he is taking such risks, because if something happens and she can't do anything, she will never forgive herself for it. Instead of answering, he simply grabbed her hand and began to look at her so intently, as if he wanted to look into her soul. Only after that, the guy whispered that it seemed he had discovered a cure for this terrible curse. And this cure, meanwhile, evening has come? Lyanna still does not leave the girl for a second. She even decided to sleep with her today so as not to disturb any of the servants. They also need rest sometimes. She managed to cope with the child very quickly. So far, she even likes this whole process of care, but most likely it will not last long. Naturally, she couldn't sleep peacefully that night. Her head was full of thoughts that she needed to digest and think about how to proceed. At the very least, she needs to figure out what to do with the child. He should live in a full-fledged family and she is nobody to him. What worries her most is the Emperor's words. He clearly won't let her go anywhere, and it's possible that he'll appear tomorrow just as unexpectedly as today, and for the whole day. The girl recalls all the words she said to him today to understand whether she said anything unnecessary. Although they had such topics today that it was difficult to control words, she simply said what she thought and felt. Although she said that she was not going to be his medicine, he still handed her the pendant and asked her to think about the offer in private. It's hard enough for her in this whole situation. She didn't even have time to understand what was going on. She was only with him and his problems the whole time. But he looked so desperate that she couldn't afford to just ignore his troubles. And she was also interested in seeing him when he shared, because he was always very kind to her no matter how much she angered him. He made such a good impression that after that day she finds it hard to believe that he really is a tyrant. It is known that the Emperor shows his ceramic nature only in the middle of the story, so there is still more to come. At the moment, while her character exists, the Emperor may act a little differently. Besides, she had no idea that he had such a secret. Just think. His body freezes when he touches someone. That's why he hated any physical contact so much. He was not just a hot-tempered emperor, but the reason for this was never mentioned. Only that his mother, the former empress, died because his powers went out of control when he was a child. He never used his powers again, that's all. And then she had a thought. Why is she so worried about Philip's past, which she only read about because it doesn't concern her in any way? Apparently she has already managed to become attached to him. It's all because he is so excessively handsome. It looks like someone won't fall asleep anytime soon. At this rate, she'll think about him until the morning, and then she'll realize it was a mistake. Lyanna literally didn't have time to blink before she saw the translucent emperor. He seemed to be here, but she thought that she was just imagining it. The girl, although she didn't believe it was him, still asked how he ended up there, after which he answered in his own voice that he simply came to find out her decision. He felt that she was thinking about it and still not sleeping, but she now has only one question. How did he appear out of nowhere, and why does she see him so poorly? He is like a ghost. Philip completely forgot that he didn't tell anyone that the necklace he gave him had a connection spell on it. This means that he is not here now, but she can see and hear him in front of her, which is very convenient. And also, if there is someone else in this room, he won't hear any of this. Only she can recognize his voice. It's impossible to believe that such technologies exist in this world. And meanwhile, the guy reminds her that he asked her a question. The girl is forced to say that, unfortunately, her answer remains the same. She will not be able to help him and would not like to comment on this in any way, if he allows it, of course. Naturally, he reacted very badly to this. The guy does not hide that he is very disappointed. And after these words, she became interested in why exactly He says that when she came into his room the other day, she promised to do everything if he let her touch him just once. And now that she has achieved what she wanted, she acts as if she doesn't know him. And he even gave her all of himself. It was very unpleasant for her to hear this, but one thing is clear. Although he is upset, he tries to manipulate until the very end, to press on pity, because there is no other option. And this way at least some hope appears. Suddenly, something will change. He also says that one way or another, tomorrow evening there will be a banquet, which he invites her to go to, and she asks why she should go there, especially since she has been so tired lately that now she needs at least a couple of days to recover and rest. Philip hints that if she came to the banquet tomorrow, he would try to charm her with this face that she seems to like. And since she won't become his medicine, then it remains to be assumed that he will have to offer more efforts to win her heart. Surprisingly, he doesn't even hide it. Although perhaps it's just easier for him to talk when he's not in front of her, but in his room. Finally, he asked again whether she had changed her mind about appearing at the event with him tomorrow. She repeated to him several times that she was not going to go there, no matter how much he tried to persuade her, and even promised to be offended if he said even one more word about it. Finally, the next day came. The event was already in full swing, and she was right there, although last night she almost quarreled with him, promising that she would never set foot there. She somehow didn't even notice how she ended up here. The girl justifies herself by saying that everything happened by itself, but her actions speak for themselves. She wanted to be here with him. In any case, since she's already here, you just need to stand quietly in the corner so that he calms down and does not get offended that she does nothing for him, and his requests are indifferent to her. It turned out to be very awkward to stand around doing nothing, and my throat was a little dry, and there was nothing else here except cocktails. Lyanna promised herself only a couple of sips, and it's hard to predict how it will turn out in the end. The girl stood quietly to the side and wanted to try the drink, but some ladies didn't notice her and one of them accidentally pushed her. The lady says that her glove got wet. She didn't even blame anyone for it, and they started acting like it was all her fault. The one who pushed her laughed a little and said that she didn't even know that there was someone in that corner, as if someone should at least let her know about themselves. Her friend added that it is not customary to be here so quietly and unnoticed, hinting that before coming to such events, one should at least learn the basic rules of conduct. Some people should just move more carefully and watch their step. And since they are talking about the rules of etiquette, it wouldn't hurt for one of them to learn, but clearly not Lino. They even started to deliberately talk out loud about how the girl had probably come here to attract the attention of one of the noblemen, and emphasized that it was even funny. Supposedly, she was unworthy of any of them, and they would rather pay attention to one of them than to her. Words cannot describe how unpleasant it was to hear this after all. The girl had never been to such events, and her first experience will be remembered forever. Some time passed, and then a man appeared in the hall, to whom everyone immediately paid attention. This is the Duke of Harrington, the father of the main character of this novel, as soon as his daughter awakened the power of fire. How he pushed out Lyanna's father, who was the heir, and took over the duchy. That's how ambitious he was, even after becoming a duke. He continued to rise up by promoting his daughter. In this world where a few ability holders hold absolute power and are revered, her strength, backed by her fire ability, sometimes had more influence than even the emperor. Of course, Philip from the imperial family also has the ability. But since there were only rumors about its awakening, and no one had ever seen him use it, the outcome was obvious. In addition to this, while Philip was at war, Elisha was appointed the future empress, and the duke's power will soon grow stronger than her. Meanwhile, those two never left the girl. They are probably so bored together that they are only looking for a reason to find fault with someone. The same girl who first started the conflict says that she heard from her father that His Majesty will soon choose a bride for himself, and she said this with such an expression on her face as if her next phrase would be no less offensive than everything before. And she also needed to ask if Lyanna was interested in this by any chance. And she was more interested not in questions now, but in the fact that if the lady was not going to drink this, then she would take this glass for herself, because she could no longer be here sober. And she deliberately doesn't react to them in any way. And this angers them because usually in secular society, it is not accepted to ignore people like that, even those with whom you don't want to have anything in common. At some point, another girl joined the conversation. She asked the same question again and asked not to bother Lady Elisha. Lyanna puts the empty glass back on the table and asks when she bothered her, as if she herself does not agree with this. That girl says that everyone saw it. Elisha took care of her. They are cousins. To which Lyanna asked again when she saw such a thing, that one of them took care of her, because it was already funny. The girl didn't understand the question, in which case I had to repeat that if they didn't have any evidence, she wasn't going to apologize to anyone. After that, they had a hard time finding words, and Lyanna looks at all this and thinks, when will this end? She didn't come across the people she wanted to spend time with here. However, this, as she believes, is invariable both in history and outside of it, to her great regret. And in the meantime, that very moment came when Philip appeared in the hall. He looked in her direction, and the first thing he even noticed was her dress or her hairdo, and the fact that there wasn't a single full glass left on the table where she stood next to her. And that was what he had asked her to abstain from, at least for the near future. She already understands what he will say to her first. She wants to pretend as if it wasn't her, but he already understood all of this. Lyanna is standing there all sweaty. She wants to rewind time so as not to make this mistake. Although at first she tried to restrain herself, but habit took over. It may be ugly to think so, but she was upset that he had such good eyesight. He noticed more than he should have. It is unclear to her how, with so many people, he was able to notice her so quickly only by turning his head to the side. And the lady also noticed a strange pattern. For some reason, she always ends up with a glass in her hand when she comes to, even without the memories of the Lyanna. Apparently, her old habits still cling to this body. Meanwhile, she wants to go somewhere where guests usually don't go, and on the way she overheard a conversation between two people, one calling someone a duke and saying that he will take care of everything himself and the other one doesn't have to worry about anything. Somehow it just so happened that she listened to the conversation, and the next phrase was like this. But anyway, whatever was there, His Majesty, if we leave things as they are, he will end up joining the war I was about to wage. Hold His Majesty until I can change course. So she realized that they were definitely talking for Philip, and began to listen even more attentively. The other man asks the Duke if this is possible, since he claims that all they need to do is contact him, to which the man says that who knows, they will find out when they try. They also discuss that the Emperor has a vulnerability when it comes to physical contact, but no one knows what it is or how it manifests itself. The first thought that came to her mind after this was that it was possible that all this could be connected with the death of the late Empress. Suddenly, the Duke says that it is quite possible that if he believes that his touch led to the death of his mother, then yes, it could have provoked something in him. And then the man looked to the side. He felt that they were not alone here, but it was unclear whether the girl had managed to hide or had shown her face. The Duke looked at the place where she stood and immediately began to finish the conversation, because they had already discussed all the main things. He didn't tell his assistant that he suspected anything. He just made it clear that they could now go their separate ways. Finally, I just asked to make sure that His Majesty will be busy at the appointed time, because this is a key moment. He also has a small task. He needs to find out what weakness the Emperor is so carefully hiding in. Unfortunately, when Lyanna had the opportunity to clean, she did not do it, and there is a reason for this. Her body doesn't obey. She tries to move, but it seems to resist and act against her. When she tried to do something, it was already too late. The man found her and immediately grabbed her by the neck so that she could not run away. He asks if he didn't order her to sit quietly locked in the house and how she dared to spy and eavesdrop on him. The girl asks to let her go. She can't breathe and even less talk to him. Her whole life flashed before her eyes, because after what she heard, they won't let her go from here just like that. He immediately noticed from her breath that she had been drinking again. He hates this disgusting smell and recognizes it from the first seconds. Suddenly he let her go and then changed the subject entirely, asking if she was looking after the child properly while wiping his fingers with a napkin, showing how unpleasant it was for him to touch her. Lyanna tries to come to her senses to get her breathing under control, and at the same time she asks with difficulty what he means. After that, he called her all sorts of names and then asked how much she had to drink to not remember what had happened so recently. The man is outraged that everything is so bad with her that she has to be reminded of literally everything that happened more than a day ago. He spoke for the child of Elisha, whom he entrusted to her, but now everything becomes much clearer. The girl looked at him as if she had just completed a puzzle that she had been unable to put together for a long time. The information cleared up some things a little, but the novel didn't say that Elisha had a child. And then, if we're talking about the girl she's currently looking after, it's hard to accept the fact that she was with that person's child all this time. As it turned out, her main task was to make sure that Elisha would never find out about that child again, and when the time came, he would take him away. He also asked her to remember the most important thing, that Ariel, that she herself, if one of them ceases to be useful, he will simply throw them both out without thinking. The man didn't wait for her to say anything about this. He silently left and made it clear that the last word was his. Before this, the girl somehow didn't think that everything could turn out like this. She is perplexed by what is happening. He is a relative of the main character, but this doesn't change the fact that he had no right to grab her by the neck like that. He will soon answer for this. Left alone on this balcony, the girl remembered what she had heard a couple of minutes ago and came to a conclusion. Those two are clearly up to something, and perhaps there is someone else on their team who is helping to carry out their evil plans. It's clear that she can't allow Philippus to get involved with these people. Now she needs to think it over very carefully and do something to help him. If they find out more about the Emperor's problem, it will be a very big problem and something needs to be done about it immediately. The girl quickly returned to the hall, found him, although he was talking to some person. She allowed herself to disturb them because his life is much more important than some rules of etiquette, especially since, as it turned out, few people know them, and even more so, adhere to them. She understood this from the example of the lady who first approached her. It so happened that she didn't even talk to him. Philip immediately saw her out of the corner of his eye and thus interrupted the conversation. She felt a little awkward because after that, everyone turned towards her. Lyanna wasn't used to this, as well as being around so many people in general. That girl is also watching her from the side and thinks that Lyanna is again trying to do something with His Majesty. Meanwhile, the lady is trying to pull herself together. She won't be able to leave. She's already here, which means she needs to say something so as not to embarrass herself. She calmly approaches His Majesty and asks if she can hold his hand for a moment right now. He certainly didn't expect this from her. Usually he has to beg for it, but here she asks for it herself. Moreover, Lyanna started to pull off his glove without his permission. Even though he asked her not to hurry, she still does it her way. Here's his hand already without anything. And at that moment, whispers and discussions began to be heard from all sides. Supposedly what she is allowing herself to do, and why he is reacting to it so calmly, as if something is happening between them, and no one knows about it yet. Someone says that she has completely gone crazy, and it is strange that he has not yet ordered someone to take her to the punishment room. People were expecting that everything would be like this, but no, so that no one would hear and she wouldn't feel awkward. The guy quietly asked what she was doing since she hadn't explained anything to him. Then he realized that she had probably been drinking and that these were just consequences. And she told him that everything was a little different and began to whisper in his ear what she had overheard a couple of minutes ago on the balcony. The girl decided that if she didn't do it right now, when there was a perfect opportunity for it, then someone might stop her. And it was her best decision. And the guy seemed to expect it and said, "That's why it's been so quiet lately." She apparently did not surprise him, and this information helped him very timely. Lyanna, meanwhile, says that one way or another, if they hold hands, he is less likely to lose control, and he thanks her for that. After that, she asked him to hold on to her tighter and hide, although he doesn't quite know how possible that is. She is more likely to hide behind him than he is behind her. And Philip is also worried that if someone else tries to harm Her Majesty. Meanwhile, the Emperor probably wanted to laugh and asked if she was seriously suggesting that he hide behind her back, because it even sounded strange. She told him one thing in response, that now was not the time to hesitate. It was better to just listen to her and do at least something than to blame yourself later. Lyanna promised to make sure that no one dared to touch His Majesty, and after that she asked to do something. They need to hurry to the Duke immediately. She can see him off, and with her whole appearance she shows that it is better not to delay for a second, because it is unknown what is in that person's head, what he is capable of, and what he is ready to step over, just to achieve his goal. The guy wants to hear if she can really protect him, because as a man it's kind of strange for him to hear that. After which she asked him how His Majesty would go to war in such a state. He asked the question, is it really impossible for him to go? And she said, of course not, because he could lose control on the battlefield and it would be a disaster. They just started walking. Halfway, they were met by the Duke. He knew that they would want to talk to him, and so it was. The man asked to be allowed to greet him again, then introduced himself as the Duke of Harrington, and said he was honored to be part of today's banquet. Only after everything the guy heard from Lyanna, these words sounded absolutely disgusting and unpleasant. After that, the man asked if he could ask why he was with Lyanna. The main thing is that there are plenty of other beautiful girls around. These words made her feel very uncomfortable and unpleasant, although it was quite expected to hear this from him. He felt it, and said that perhaps he would now talk to him alone, and asked her to enjoy the banquet in the meantime. As soon as he was free, he would definitely return to her. She stood motionless in one place all this time. He sees how difficult it is for her, and repeated once again that he will return soon. He just doesn't want her to hear this conversation. At this moment, the man is completely perplexed. He is not happy to see these two together, especially when the guy is so gentle with her. In the end, she was able to leave, went outside to the fountain because there is less chance of meeting someone, and you can calmly be alone in silence. Now she feels very bad because she promised to protect him. But at the same time, she trembled in front of the Duke and is worried that the Emperor saw it. She does not like that her body has not obeyed her at all in the presence of the Duke of Harrington lately. She had just begun to think that His Majesty would discuss everything with the Duke properly. And at that moment, the guy appeared in front of her. He just looked at her and wondered why she was here and looked like someone had managed to offend her. He asked what happened, and she says she just didn't want to stay inside, that's all. She is not going to tell anyone that she was stunned by the attention after this situation was resolved. And in the meantime, she asks how the conversation went, because a lot depends on it. Philip says that the Duke of Harrington will take part in the war with caution, and this makes her very happy because this is exactly what she was hoping for. And then he admits that he didn't expect that she was ready to do so much for him, to try, just because she is a good person. And he also warmed her with his cape. It was very timely because a little more and she would have turned into an ice statue. It turns out that he had been watching her very carefully all this time and concluded that he had not been mistaken at the beginning. She had drunk a lot of cocktails. Now he is interested in knowing the specific number so that he can better understand what to do with it next, and how safe it is for it to stay here until the end. Naturally, she couldn't say anything else except that there was just one sip, which she had already forgotten. Then she admitted that it was one glass, no more, and then she laughed and blushed so much that she gave herself away. Lyanna understands from his look that it is better to bring the answer closer to the truth, and instead of one sip, she already says a couple of glasses. First 2, then 3, and finally 5. Even after such an answer, he understands perfectly well that she embellished the truth so that he would not get too angry, and that in reality there were much more of their glasses to drink, maybe even several times more. But now he has no questions for her. Philip simply reminded her what the doctor told her about alcohol, and even now she begins to make excuses. Supposedly she was just tasting it so as not to stand around doing nothing, after which he asked her to go to the carriage, and he himself would soon join her. He needs to settle some matters at the reception. The girl says that he doesn't have to see her off, but he sees that with every minute this man is losing control of himself more and more. Without consulting, he asked her to stay there, and he himself would assign a knight to accompany her to the carriage, and she agreed with her eyes closed. Only it looked as if she did not even understand what exactly. After some time, she herself already feels that she could not have drunk so much of everything to feel so terrible. Now it's hard to even open your eyes. The girl is behaving in such a way that from the outside it looks both strange and funny at the same time. A man came up to her and asked if she needed help getting up. She said she was fine, even though you wouldn't know it. At the same time, she imagines how to watch this from the side. She is already terribly ashamed of this, and in the meantime, she already has abrasions on her knees. She starts calling herself weak because she couldn't resist some glasses, and that's very low. By some amazing coincidence, it turned out that she again witnessed some conversation, and of course decided to go through with it, at least as far as possible. Behind the bushes stands the Duke with his assistant. He accuses him of not having handled even this trifle properly. Because of this, he will now have to go to war. The assistant says that he is terribly sorry and tries to explain that everything happened because Lyanna intervened. And the man tries to explain that this is all a very critical moment. Immediately after this, a phrase was heard, after which everything became clear and fell into place. Namely that they must speed up the marriage union between His Majesty and Elisha by any means necessary. The girl, of course, guessed that they had some plans regarding the Emperor, but she didn't think that the two of them were trying to set him up with someone. It's very unfortunate that the main character's father is also a stock, but this shouldn't interfere with her mission to help the Emperor. Only now did she remember that if he saw her again, it would not end well, especially after he realized that she was not a stranger to the Emperor. It so happened that this time she couldn't hide properly. He saw her almost immediately, and at that moment she simply went into a stupor. There's nothing to do. She has to make excuses. She says that she wasn't actually trying to eavesdrop, and he misunderstood everything, and she thinks about how she needs to somehow get back to the knight as quickly as possible. She also says that she just felt dizzy. Then she fell, and didn't notice how time passed, and he and his assistant ended up here too. She thought that was enough, and then he suddenly hit her very hard in the face, and absolutely mercilessly. With this, he weakened her again. Lyanna felt helpless, even if she now starts to resist and hits him in response. This will only make things worse. The Duke orders her to answer honestly whether she is going to snitch to the Emperor, hinting that if she does so, she will regret it later. And he also called her ungrateful and insulted her more than once. So much so that even his assistant standing next to him felt awkward, because he had never heard anyone call girls that way. The man is outraged that after all his care for her, she dares to behave like this and switch sides instead of helping him. He won't call her to ruin his reputation, and until she comes over to his side, every time he notices her, the same thing will happen as now. Meanwhile, he grabbed her by the hair and said that she should have sat quietly like a doll and not created trouble at every banquet. I wonder what would have happened to him if he had found out that it was actually the Emperor who invited her to this banquet. Moreover, at first she even refused, and he insisted that she change her mind. It's no secret that Lyanna attracted his attention, but this was not part of the Duke's plans. And since she has become an obstacle for him, it is clear that he is already thinking about getting rid of her. But he will try to do it as carefully as possible without leaving any traces. And then the next question came in. Does she really sincerely believe that this will give her at least some freedom? But for now, the lady does not fully understand what he is talking about and what to answer to this. In the original story, her heroine got close to Philip not for the sake of the Empress's status, but rather to survive. While he yells at her, the girl thinks that Lyanna had some kind of incurable disease, but she seems quite healthy, considering that she is still conscious even after such a blow. While she doesn't react to him in any way, it really irritates him. so he sees that he is not an authority for her. He felt so offended that he raised his hand to her again, and this time everything happened as if in slow motion. She saw it, immediately closed her eyes, because she wouldn't be able to resist anyway. But this time she was lucky. But he wasn't so lucky. He just swung to hit her even harder. And at that moment, a voice was heard that was very familiar to both of them. They turn around to see if they got it right, and each one has completely different emotions. The guy asks what's going on here, but at the same time he looks at it as if he's making it clear that there's no need to answer this question because everything is already clear. After a long silence, he warned that he would not ask a third time, so he advised answering right now. The Duke began to justify himself by saying that she had caused a stir at the banquet, and therefore, being the elder of the family, he had only shown her her place a little and believed that he had done everything correctly, to which the guy says that to tell the truth, he is from the Harrington house, and that does not make him the head of the house. After which he asked whether there was hardly anything in this frail body that was worth raising a hand to, so the Duke says that those injuries were received when she fell herself, so he has nothing to do with it, and also swore that he was only scolding her, nothing more. The girl stands aside and wonders how he can lie shamelessly and still play it out, as if he's right. After that, she asked herself, does he really think that after he beat her, she will let him go so easily and allow him to behave like that? She immediately turned to His Majesty so that he would look at her more closely and answer the question of whether she could really do such a thing to herself. The guy immediately notices that her lips are bleeding, after which she says that the Duke has not said a single truthful word, so everything he said should be taken exactly the opposite. The man is indignant at how she dares to deceive His Majesty, and she looks at him and wonders how much courage he has. So that he wouldn't think that this could scare her off, she said that he hit her so hard that it seemed like all her teeth were about to fall out. After this, the guy turned to the Duke, saying that he constantly talks about his deep affection for his niece. But what he does towards her somehow does not coincide with what he says about her. While he is talking to him, the girl feels completely safe, at least now. If something happens to her and she suddenly disappears somewhere, he will know whose doing it is. The Emperor does not spare words. He speaks to the point, without hints, because this man deserves it. Suddenly he asked, didn't he, under the guise of patronage over his niece, gain control not only over the fortune of the Daphne family, but over the entire house? Immediately after this, Lyanna thought that it turns out that the Duke controlled everything, and this means that Lyanna does not own anything. In the novel, he was described as an arrogant character, but here, just one look from the Duke of Harrington paralyzes her with fear, and on top of that, she was taken away. The whole state. It's not like she read the novel very carefully, but neither Philip nor Lyanna are like those she remembers. I need to somehow understand what happened here. Nothing fits together for her again, and it's very upsetting. Meanwhile, the guy says that if this is what he calls protection, then perhaps the Duke's powers should be revoked. The man shouted loudly that it was impossible because it was he, Ralph Rington, who had been guarding Daphne's house for the last 20 years, and no one knew better than him how to deal with all this. He doesn't fully understand that he can actually lose his title just because he wanted to appear stronger than a girl. The Emperor continues to press him with questions, this time asking him to tell him why he was so angry. After all, if he remembers correctly, his guardianship over Daphne's house was supposed to continue only until the heiress came of age. It means he should have returned everything a long time ago. But he put it off for years, and now, by raising his voice like this, he only makes you think that all this is being done only because he has been hunting for his niece's fortune for a long time. He shouted loudly again that his fortune was much greater and that there was no point in him wanting something so insignificant. Then explained that he simply continued to manage Daphne's house because young Lyanna herself had asked him to do so. After these words, to make sure of their truth, His Majesty asked the lady how true it was. She immediately replied that this was absolutely not true, although she had no idea what the real Lyanna was telling him. It is possible that the Duke was not lying about this, but now the girl is saying what is beneficial to her and not to him. Judging from the conversation, the guy concluded that it seemed that the young lady did not want the Duke's protection, and from today on, full power over the house of Daphne should be returned to its rightful heir. After these words, the man's face turned pale, and to finish him off completely, His Majesty, it wouldn't hurt to also deal with the bruises on Lyanna's body. The guy even asked her how she would like to punish this man, and she asked for at least 1 minute to think about it. She remembered just in time that the Duke had mentioned before that there was still time before his departure and that this could somehow be used against him. Now she's already saying that it would be fair to punish these two equally, namely, send the two of them out onto the battlefield today, and she'd love to see it happen. Some time passed. Everyone went about their business, and Philip, as usual, could not just leave her. He offered his help instead of doctors doing it. at least out of a desire to thank her for what she did for him. Namely, opened his eyes to some people who pretended to be one, but in fact were his enemies. The girl complains that he hurts her, asked him to be more gentle, and he asks not to exaggerate, after which he suddenly changed the subject and asked if her punishment for the Duke was appropriate, because personally he would have come up with something worse. She tells him that she doesn't see anything wrong with it, after which she asks if it's really possible to just send the Duke to the battlefield, because there must be some proper procedure. He replies that there is such a procedure, but he still isn't going to follow it. Then, there were also words that if the Duke died on the battlefield, it would create problems. However, in her opinion, it was not that important, and she did not understand how one could remain so unperturbed saying such a thing. The guy says that it's as if they've switched places, because she's the one who shouldn't feel sorry for the one who offended her, but she's the one who's protecting him. And then something unexpected and at the same time interesting happened. Philip admitted that he had once overheard their conversation, namely when the Duke said that, having become closer to the Emperor, she would finally be able to breathe freely. He wants to ask what this meant, because this thought has been bothering him ever since he heard it. Now she doesn't even know what worries me more, that he overheard or that he cares about such delicate moments of her personal life. He also asked if a man had treated her so rudely before, and she had never complained about it to anyone, to which she replied that, frankly speaking, she herself did not know the answer to this question. He didn't quite understand how to interpret this. Lyanna explained that every time she saw the Duke, her body would freeze and she couldn't talk normally. This could mean that they didn't have a very good relationship. She also said that, as he already knew, there were quite a few gaps in her memory, so she was afraid that she couldn't give a clear answer. She also asked him not to misunderstand her, after all. Her forgetfulness was not connected with cocktails, as he probably thought all this time. And then a question came out that made her sweat all over. Namely, if she needed him, then maybe he should stay close even when there was no reason to. She wondered if this meant that in return, she would have to become a medicine for His Majesty, after which he warned that he did not insist on this. She could do this only if she wanted to and in no other way. In that case, she asked what exactly this treatment involves, but unfortunately, he himself does not know such specifics. The guy can only assume that her fiery power is capable of melting the shard of ice in his heart. After that, she had a completely logical question. What if it doesn't work out? To which he said that in that case, it would at least prevent his brain from freezing completely. And in such a state of affairs, he fears that both his mind and his heart will eventually become completely numb. It was strange to her that while he was saying this, he was smiling, as if they were discussing something pleasant. After that, she asked him directly why she, after all, if he needs the power of fire, then Elisha might also suit him. But this is only her assumption. Philip explains that no one else will do. He tried to make contact with that lady, but it still provoked a riot. And she is the only one whose hand he can hold, and the only one from whom he gets warmth. These were very pleasant words because the realization that his life could depend only on her was incomparable to anything. And after that, he even admitted that he only needed her. And in case of refusal, he would not even try to replace her with someone else, because he felt that it was impossible. After that, she very quickly agreed. After all, nothing prevents her from helping him with just touches, and it is not difficult at all. At first, he didn't even believe that he heard these words from her, and looked at her like a small child who was promised something unimaginable. He sincerely thanked her and admitted that he didn't believe that it was even possible for the latter. After some time, he tells her that, as he has already repeated more than once, she can use his help at any time. She tells him that it doesn't work like that. She can't dare to use His Majesty. Besides, she does it without expecting anything in return. After that, he has a question. Then why did she agree to this? The girl says she doesn't even know, because even after the refusal, she continued to think about it. Or maybe her true feelings just burst out because of a couple of glasses. And she also wanted to tell him that since it came down to it, she managed to find out whose child Ariel is, while she can barely restrain herself from falling asleep right here and now without finishing the conversation with him. And then she says that as far as she understood everything correctly, Ariel is Eliga's child, but Elisha doesn't seem to know about him, so she's unsure whether she should tell him about it. The guy seemed to get her point. So if she was so tired and couldn't talk normally now, he suggested that she take a rest, and they would discuss everything else tomorrow when they were both in a normal state. Lyanna tries with all her might to say that she still has a lot to tell, but she really doesn't have the strength for it. The girl decided that she would sleep for only 5 minutes, no more, and then she would clarify what her role as a medicine would be, and it would also be desirable to decide what to do with Ariel now, while somehow she would have to express her gratitude for saving her. He looked at her after a couple of minutes and saw that Lyanna was sleeping, and so soundly that it would be difficult to wake her up if desired. His Majesty sees for the first time someone falling asleep right on a chair, in a vertical position. And for some reason, he wonders what he is doing. Despite the fact that Lyanna is the only one who can melt the ice in his heart, he himself does not understand why he is doing this. He lost his temper because of the Duke, whom he usually did not pay attention to. It seems to him that nevertheless, if she is going to sleep, it would be worthwhile to take her to a more comfortable place. Philip was preparing for this. He thought it would be hard, but she was like a feather that he could easily take with one hand and not strain himself. While he was carrying her, he thought about how it was possible to hit such a fragile creature, looking at which it is impossible to even think about doing such a thing. A normal person should want to show care and love towards her, and if someone dared to do such a thing, he should be punished. The most offensive thing is that the man spared no effort. Now she has burst capillaries, and this is proof that she could not have hit herself like that. Philip thought he should probably tell her to put some ice on her before her face swelled up anymore. He just had the idea to leave here before she woke up. Someone appeared in the room who apparently couldn't sleep. Little Ariel came in, and since there was no one around her, he would have to take care of her too. But he wasn't so callous as to pass by. The guy has had very little to do with children in his life. For him, it is something unknown, so he has no idea what her behavior means, whether she wants to be held or, on the contrary, is not happy to see him. He is very afraid to touch her once more, so as not to harm her, because Ariel looks so fragile that he wants to avoid her. Meanwhile, he tells her that if she was planning to play with him, then he should apologize because it's time to sleep, and for both of them. As a result, all three of them ended up on the same bed. The guy doesn't realize what's happening and is already afraid of the girl's reaction when she opens her eyes and sees them next to her. Not only was this day already very eventful, Philip was tired, but also because of Ariel. Until she closed her eyes, he wouldn't be able to fall asleep. At some point, Lyanna probably thought that instead of him, there was a huge pillow on the right. She started hugging him and pressed herself so tightly that he immediately felt awkward. Immediately after this, Philip noticed how hard his heart began to beat. He even heard this sound. And then he thought that he was already very confused, and his damned heart, which usually never gets excited, was suddenly beating so wildly, probably because she was so close to him. His heart is already beating so hard that I wonder what it will be like when it thaws out completely. Will it be difficult if it gets even louder? Then instead of melting completely, perhaps it should melt only enough to not create unnecessary noise. A couple of hours have passed. The guy still hasn't fallen asleep. He's trying to think about something pleasant, but nothing but bad comes to mind. And this is also the first time he's been in bed with someone at a conscious age. He's never had to share a bed with someone before. And now this. He is upset that the swelling on her face is starting to get worse. And this is happening with every minute. It is getting bigger and redder. It's a bit awkward that if he makes even the slightest movement, he might wake them both up. And to make matters worse, the servant's bell is out of my reach. Despite all this, the swelling needs to be cooled somehow. But the task of getting ice seems impossible. And then a brilliant idea appears in his head because if he needs ice, he can simply use himself. Just as she helped him with warmth, so he can help her with cold. When he was 7 years old, his power destroyed his mother. Since then, he was too afraid to resort to ice magic again. But now it is necessary. So after so many years, he uses his power. But it feels like he is breaking some law. If the elders find out about it, they will be furious. He can only hope that she won't become as cold as his mother was then. Otherwise, he will never forgive himself for this and will never dare to use his powers again. As soon as he touched her cheek, Lyanna immediately smiled through her sleep and even whispered something. She was so pleased by it. When she had already come to her senses a little, he asked how well she felt the coolness. And the girl simply smiled. And that said it all, because without it, even in her sleep, she lay with such an expression on her face as if she was very ill. Naturally, the guy is very pleased. He is glad that he brought her at least some benefit, because it was already impossible to watch her face swell. He even said that her smile made her look beautiful, and after that they both smiled. And he also had a fleeting thought that maybe it was even good that everything turned out this way. Otherwise they wouldn't be lying in this bed and he wouldn't have such feelings for her in the middle of the night. He even felt embarrassed that he himself smiled after her. Although she did not see it, Philip was still embarrassed. If someone had seen him at that moment, they would have decided that he had gone crazy. Because how could one smile, looking at her face in such a state? After some time, when his body couldn't take it anymore and fell asleep on its own, this was the only way the guy could get enough sleep. It's already morning outside. Lyanna was the first to open her eyes. She first felt that something was wrong, and then she realized that someone's hand was lying under her head, literally. At that very second, the girl seemed to abstract herself from everything that surrounded her because she felt that her face did not hurt anywhere. And she was also surprised why there was such vigor in her body, which was too much for just 5 minutes of napping. Then she felt that she had buried her nose in some hard pillow, opened her eyes, and what she experienced cannot be described in words. Girl, I couldn't imagine that I would end up in the same bed with this man, and now he is closer to her than arm's length. It turns out he hadn't been sleeping all this time. He was just pretending to be with his eyes closed to hear how she would react. Philip asks how she feels and also carefully hints that if she has already rested, it wouldn't hurt to get up, because her arm has been very numb all night. She panics and starts asking what he is doing here and why he couldn't go to his room, to which he says that he has a rough idea of what she imagined, but it's not quite true, so he can relax. She felt awkward that he was saying such a thing. The lady replied that she actually hadn't thought about anything like that, hugging the blanket closer to her. And then Lyanna remembers that very day when she woke up with him on the bed in exactly the same way, and despite the fact that he said that nothing like that happened, she still asks, did she really overdo it with the cocktails yesterday and attack him again? And if he says now that's what happened, she'll just pass out. He repeated once again that she had done nothing of the sort. She had simply been sleeping peacefully, and even after that, the girl asked if she had really touched him or bent him over. Like last time, he again replied that nothing of the sort had happened, and after that, she felt better. After all this, he asked if her face was normal, and she grabbed the mirror and thought that her cheek was probably already terribly swollen and was preparing to see it in the reflections. The guy smiled at that moment, and she looked in the mirror and couldn't believe her eyes because everything was fine with her face, as if nothing had happened. Lyanna can't believe her eyes. It seems to her that she didn't wake up, rather than her face after everything that happened. This is what it really looks like. He was worried that even though everything seemed fine, she might still be in pain, but there was nothing wrong. She was fine. It was probably she who should say such words, but he said it. What a relief, as if he was more worried about her than she was about herself. Lyanna finally remembered that she hadn't thanked him, and did it right now, before it was too late, so that he wouldn't think that she wouldn't help him. She really felt very embarrassed that before that, she had been out of her mind and had not thanked him properly, to which he replied that, nevertheless, her lips and broken capillaries required proper treatment, and that this was only the least he could do for her. Even if she hadn't thanked him or said anything, it wouldn't have affected anything at all. Then they noticed Ariel. She had been sleeping all this time and just opened her eyes, and like all children at that age, she immediately started crying as if she was unhappy about something. The girl all this time thought that the butler or someone else would put her to bed, and the girl slept so quietly that she was not heard all night. Perhaps this day was just an exception, because usually Ariel wakes up several times while everyone is sleeping. They look at her with such eyes, but inside each one is slightly pleased that with them the child is not capricious at all, at least most of the time. Lyanna is true that she likes it here with them, but she is worried about the fact that she might soon have to forbid them from calling her mom. If the child gets used to treating her like that, in the future it could cause problems, and not only for her. At some point, the girl and Ariel stared at him as if something had happened and he didn't notice. Lyanna didn't remain silent for long. She asked him if it seemed to him that this girl had become a little bigger than how they saw her on the first day of their acquaintance. The guy says that he is very interested in why the girl still calls her mom, because she can already pronounce some words, to which the lady replied that maybe her name is too difficult for her, so she says it as conveniently and as she can. Philip didn't think it worked like that. For some reason, he was sure that if children say anything, then they can say anything. But that's not true. Lyanna suggested that he verify this, after which she asked the girl to try to repeat some words after her. She asked to say a word, Lyanna, and Ariel said this to that, Uguga, and with such an expression on her face as if she had said everything correctly and was even happy with it. Philip thinks something is wrong here, and the girl asks how one can suspect someone so nice. At this point, they notice that the child is sweating. All her clothes are wet, although the room is quite cool. At that very second, the pendant that was lying on the dresser suddenly started making some sounds and vibrating. The guy immediately said that everything was fine. It was his thing for communication. He approached him with a very serious expression on his face, answered the call, and then it started. He even immediately lost his mood. The man immediately started to get indignant. Where was the guy last night? Then he saw a girl next to them and got even more angry. She felt awkward, said hello so as not to look rude, but it still didn't help. There were only more questions. Philip tries to calm his interlocutor down, but he can't be stopped. This will last at least 15 minutes, or even more. For some reason at this moment, His Majesty forgot about his interlocutor and began to ask the lady if she was by any chance hungry, because he remembered that yesterday they both were not able to have dinner, to which she tells him that everything is fine. But it seems that now is not the best time to talk to her, because there is still someone on the line. Then someone came up to the man and started asking if it was true that His Majesty had raised his hand against the Duke of Harrington yesterday. To which the guy replied that he had rather taken something from him and sent him far away. That adequate person was surprised, because the guy had never been interested in the Duke's affairs before. And now, suddenly, such news. He, unlike that man, speaks very politely because he has at least some respect for people, and he has control over his emotions. In order not to drag out this conversation for too long, he politely asked to urgently return to the palace, and if possible, to take the young lady with him. Some time passed. The girl asks if Philip has changed his clothes yet. This time they can't get out of here calmly. Shortly before that, as luck would have it, Ariel spilled milk on His Majesty right before leaving, when they were already on the threshold. While they are standing on different sides of the screen, she asks him, if it comes to that, is it true that she is causing him inconvenience? To which he says that it is not at all. He acted on his own, so she has nothing to do with it. And if we take the situation as a whole, then he did not feel any trouble from her. And if he did, then he would not be here now, and he would at least say so. While they weren't talking, the girl very clearly said Mom and Dad. And after that, they immediately stopped talking because this was the first time she said these two words so clearly. Lyanna noticed that the child was crawling on the floor and asked her not to do this. Even though it was clean, there could still be some dust on it, and it was also colder than it should be. The girl wondered why Ariel was crawling somewhere so often, doing something, showing emotions. And then she realized that she was just sad and trying to do something while no one was paying attention to her. Lyanna is still worried that she might accidentally step on her foot or hand, and she is so small and fast that this is quite possible. Unfortunately, so some of her desires will have to be forbidden. When a child is on the floor, he seems even smaller, which makes it impossible to remain calm and move normally. And here the most interesting part begins. Lyanna wanted to move away, but behind her there was a screen, which very easily pushed and began to fall together with her right on Philip. She tried to warn him as best she could and asked him to move away, but he, on the contrary, stayed to soften the fall. Lyanna apologized for making his life difficult even now, and for no apparent reason when it could have been avoided if she had been a little more attentive. It just so happened that the lady started falling on him at the very moment when his shirt was unbuttoned, and now she was lying on his stomach. It's a very awkward moment. Ariel is watching this as if it were some kind of movie. She even calmed down and doesn't take her eyes off them. The girl asked him just in case if everything was okay, and he didn't even hide the fact that he thought something was definitely damaged. And at that moment, she almost lost consciousness from the thought that she had managed to harm the Emperor. Inside, she is absolutely sure that she will definitely be punished for this. And it could be so serious and strong that it will be difficult to survive. Naturally, in such a situation, she couldn't help but think about what a perfect and beautiful body he has, which she wants to admire for as long as possible. And she also felt ashamed that she was even thinking about it when in half an hour she could end up in a cell under surveillance, risking her life. Lyanna couldn't resist and asked him to cover himself up a bit with his clothes because it would be impossible to have a serious conversation in such a situation. He asks why she scolds him out of the blue instead of apologizing or at least behaving calmly without escalating the situation, as she is doing right now. Suddenly, he asks why she is silent and what she is thinking about, after which the girl blushed even more, but still answered that she is not one of those who thinks a lot, no matter how it sounds. Philip doubts this very much. Otherwise, she would not have looked at his body for so long without looking away. She began to justify herself by saying that, in fact, she had been looking at the floor all this time, although he saw everything perfectly well and it was useless. This only embarrassed him more. She wanted to run away from here, but the girl simply understood that if she did this, it would only make things worse, so it was better to stay until the end and pretend that everything was fine. At this moment, Lyanna notices that some kind of snowflake has appeared on his body, although perhaps it was there before. It was just covered by a shirt. She thought it was very strange and even asked him to open his shirt a little more, if he didn't mind, of course. Philip reminded her that she hadn't just been indignant that he wasn't covered up enough by his clothes, and hinted that her demands on him regarding this were changing too quickly. She didn't really hear him because I was thinking about the symbol above his heart that seemed to fade every time she touched it. Meanwhile, he asked her to stop touching it and even promised that he wouldn't tease her anymore. Instead of answering, she asked him to look when he touched it. But as soon as she took her hand away, everything disappeared. It's clear that he's very uncomfortable now, although it's strange because when she touched him in other places, everything was fine. He is already so angry that he can barely restrain himself from being rude to her or abruptly removing her hand from himself. Suddenly he says that it seems that when she touches him, the power weakens and the symbol fades. Only judging by his facial expression, he is already irritated by everything. She just said that she wanted to touch him one more time, and he roughly took her hand and said that he didn't allow it, for the first time in all the time they've known each other. The girl explains that she just wanted to look at him one more time. But since that's the case, she won't be so persistent and will try not to spoil his mood. After that, she asked him why he still hadn't gotten up, and he answered with a dissatisfied face that he was just about to get up. Lyanna is very worried that after all this, his attitude towards her may worsen tenfold, and this will be a big problem. Even though he just said that he was already getting up, he still sits on the floor as if he can't do it because of the pain. Lyanna was sitting quietly opposite him, and at that moment someone bursts into the door. Despite the fact that the butler tried in every way to stop this person, but he did not succeed. They look at the girl in your eyes and understand that she will most likely misunderstand everything and will have to spend a long time explaining that everything is not as she thought. Elisha looked at them and was immediately horrified, as if she saw something bad, although those two were just sitting on the floor opposite each other. She came closer and started asking what was going on here, why there was so much noise coming from this room, as if there was some kind of fight going on. After some time, they were able to calmly sit down at the table. A conversation began, which progressed very slowly and with great difficulty. The girls sit opposite each other, trying to pretend that nothing bothers them, although each of them has a lot of thoughts. Lyanna thought it would be better to start with an explanation about Ariel, because the child is the most important thing, and it is very important to finally figure it out about her. The girl remembers well how Duke Harrington insisted that she not tell Elisha about Ariel, but it would be right to tell her that her child was here. Besides, it's strange that the child calls him mom right in front of his real mother. If you tell him about it, no one will believe it. She just wanted to ask Elisha to listen to her, but the girl started talking first. She wanted to ask if she understood correctly that Lyanna had finally achieved her goal. According to her, Lyanna always said that she wanted to be with His Majesty, and with every word she said, the smile on her face slowly disappeared. And she also said that Lyanna kept saying this over and over again, and now she admitted how much it upsets her. Lyanna began to explain that the girl understood everything incorrectly. She began by saying that she and His Majesty simply fell by accident, but Elisha was not going to listen to her at all. She is already saying loudly that she knows everything, and the more she hears this lie, the more disgusted she is to be here. The guy sits between them and tries to understand what they are talking about because one says one thing, the other says something else, and he doesn't see any logic in it. Elisha, in anger, hinting that it was all because of Lyanna, reported that her father had been stripped of all authority over the Daphne estate, and the girl at that moment thinks that, technically, nothing was taken away, but they simply returned what already belonged to her. That's all. Elisha couldn't keep silent about how the girl sent her elderly father to the battlefield without even a sword. Although if she knew that he deserved it, she wouldn't be screaming now. Moreover, knowing that person, it is very difficult to say that he fits the definition of an elderly person, judging by how hard he hit her. He is far from old. Lyanna began to explain that after their last meeting, she could say with certainty that the man was not weak at all. He was very strong. To which his daughter replied that when he lost his titles, Lyanna was next to him when he went to war. From these words, it became clear that the girl simply was not going to listen to what she was told. She asserted her own and did not accept anyone's opinion. In the end, Lyanna simply asked her what she was getting at. Elisha asked her sister if she was just so upset that her father became the Duke instead of her father, and that's why she did it. Lyanna is indignant and asks what she is saying because this is too much even for her. The girl does not understand how it is possible to claim that she had any plan for revenge at all, and that all this was done just for the sake of it, to take revenge on someone, because this is absolutely not true. Elisha continued by saying that she was not taking all these facts out of thin air, and had also heard that her sister had recently been in His Majesty's chambers and had suggested that the girl had intentionally tried to get closer to him for the sake of profit. Lyanna immediately shut her mouth, because saying such a thing in the presence of His Majesty was too much, even though he himself knew that it was absolutely not as people might have thought, including her sister. Lyanna asked her to let her clarify this, after which she asked if the girl really thought that she could do this on purpose and planned it all in advance, to which her sister replied that that was how she understood it. And then Philip finally decided to intervene, because he apparently realized that the two of them couldn't handle it. He turned to Elisha and asked if he was like a puppet emperor who would allow himself to be ruled for a petty revenge. Elisha explains that she didn't actually mean it that way and is ready to apologize for her words right now. After this, Philip also hinted that, judging by her behavior, one could conclude that the girl had inherited from her father the ability to invent all sorts of nonsense that is impossible for adequate people to listen to. As it usually happens at the moment when he is talking to someone, the guy suddenly switches to Lyanna and asks how she feels. He even offered to bring her some warm water with honey. She told him that everything was fine, but he still didn't return to Elisha. The girl is already angry with him. He literally put her on the back burner. And of course, she couldn't keep quiet. She says that actually she is his fiancée, not her sister. After which he asked how she could even say such a thing and who told her such a thing. He personally does not remember ever having a fiancé. Elisha reminded him of the prophecy that they were destined for each other from birth, but it seems that these words did not change his mind. He asked how she could remember that ridiculous story that the Daphne race would be his salvation. And after that, he asked her if she understood correctly that Daphne's family was not limited to her, as if hinting at something. Lyanna listens to them and still does not fully understand what prophecy and salvation they are talking about and what is happening in general. Elisha started screaming that her sister had no abilities and that she was the only one who was perfect and that there was no way this could happen. Moreover, her father and even the late emperor all said that she was the one who was destined to be his bride. His face shows that he doesn't agree with this a little. The guy asked her if she thinks her father just wants a puppet emperor that he will control. After all this, the girl rose from her seat, began to walk and say that no matter what, His Majesty would marry her under any circumstances, and she will not allow it to be the other way around. And for some girls to appear too often near him, who can hinder her in this. When she was about to leave without even saying goodbye, Philip asked her at the end if she really wanted to marry him and was ready to do anything for it. She replied that of course, absolutely, and it doesn't matter at all whether he likes it or not, since she had already decided everything for herself and a long time ago. After a few minutes, Lyanna thought that she should go out and talk to her and promised His Majesty to return soon. Elisha turns around and asks how the girl even dares to talk to her, especially after everything that just happened. Lyanna tries to explain that she understands that her sister doesn't like her. But no matter how you look at it, her father started all this first and everything that is happening now is just a consequence. The girl asks what he did, and Lyanna asks her to look at his face on which there is no undamaged area. She says that it was all his doing, or rather his fists, which he mercilessly swung at her. Elisha apparently didn't believe that the Duke was capable of such a thing, and she also said that even if that was the case, it meant that Lyanna deserved everything he did to her. When she said this, she was even embarrassed to look into his eyes, as if she understood inside what it meant to say. It was already too much. Lyanna says that none of this matters. She didn't come here to argue, because there is something much more important. The girl asked about her child, and Elisha reacted as if it was a big secret or something like that. She asked her to watch her tongue and not try to defame her name with baseless rumors. Without thinking for a second, Lyanna said directly that the girl, Ariel, who was next to her, was her daughter. With these words, she drove her sister into a stupor. Now it will be very interesting to hear what she will say about this. Suddenly, Elisha turns around and starts to leave, and Lyanna repeated once again that in fact her child is now unattended and something needs to be done about it. The girl asked with an indignant expression. What did it matter to her? It sounded just awful on her part. It seems that the child is some kind of unpleasant symbol for her, and she tries not to think about him or hear about him. She even dared to ask what she had to do with it. Even though, being her mother, this question sounds strange. Lyanna takes her hand and asks how she can even say such a thing about her child, which makes her sister even more angry. Elisha even dared to say that Ariel does not exist in her life and will never exist. It is her decision. And also that she doesn't have a daughter and she forbids anyone to mention it from now on. This is officially the worst thing the girl has heard in her life. Because if she doesn't need this child so much, then the question arises, why did she give birth to her then? At that moment, an unpleasant atmosphere immediately appeared around, which seemed to warn that the more words there were about the child, the stronger the anger and rage would grow inside her mother. Suddenly, the girl asked her sister not to do anything and generally try to forget about Ariel. But it's strange how she imagines it. The child is very small and no one except his mother will take care of him. As soon as she becomes useless to anyone, her life will be in danger. The situation is very difficult. It is impossible to imagine how, being someone's mother, you can hate your child so much. At this moment, the ring on Lyanna's finger begins to shine very brightly. And if this happens, her body immediately weakens. She already feels very bad and can hardly hear anything her sister says to her. And if nothing changes, over time she will stop seeing her at all. Philip came just in time. He literally improved her well-being with his presence, after which Elisha suddenly wanted to leave on business.